All right, problem 8.6, which measurement is best? So what is the actual measure? Clearly you have multiple measurements from which to choose. How can you decide what is the best estimate of length of the classroom? Look at the data set for each tool along with their histograms and box plots and consider the center, shape, spread, and outliers. With your team, discuss what you can learn from each of these pieces of information about the precision or consistency of each measuring tool, as well about the length of the classroom. Which of the many numbers that you could choose is the best estimate for the actual length of the classroom? Why? What do you think accounts for the greater consistency of one tool? So we have a lot of parts to talk about in this question. So let's look at this first part here. So what is the actual measure? Clearly you have multiple measurements from which to choose. How can you decide what is the best estimate of the length of the classroom? So for this, we talked about in the last problem, and you can go back to view the histogram and the box plots there, or hopefully you have corrected yours, so you should have yours out and looking at. We know that the spread of data is much greater in the ruler than it is in the measuring tape. So the measuring tape is more consistent. So let's say that first. The measuring tape is more consistent, which means that it gives a more, the people who are using the measuring tape to measure most often get numbers that are closer to each other. So since the measuring tape is more consistent, the median of the measuring tape and that median of the measuring tape was 337 would be an accurate, or the most accurate, estimate of measure. All right, so we've answered the first part of this question. So we want to talk about, which out of all the numbers would be the best estimate for the actual length of the classroom. We actually did talk about that in our answer. So, we said, hey, the measuring tape is more consistent. It has a smaller spread of data, which means that people measuring using the measuring tape, they are going to have numbers that are closer together. So why is that? And what do we think accounts for the greater consistency of one tool? So why is it that the measuring tape would yield more accurate or more consistent results than the ruler? So let's talk about that. The measuring tape, when we pull one end out, if you visualize a measuring tape, it's that yellow tape that comes out of kind of that little square that you can hold in your hand and then pull it out. And then we all know what a ruler looks like. So if you think about the measuring tape, you can have one person stand on one end of the room and the other person extend it all the way out to the other end of the classroom. So the ruler, you have to have one person, if you start on one end of the room, then one person kind of has to put their finger down and mark where you left off, and you have to keep picking it up and putting it back down. So, there is room for, human error in that method of measurement. So we're going to add this to our explanation. So we're going to say the measuring tape is more consistent than the ruler because it can stretch the entire length of the classroom. Now let's talk about that ruler. So the ruler, on the other hand, needs to be picked up and moved every 12 inches, which can lead to some error. So it's definitely, things to think about and consider when choosing an accurate measuring tool. So what would be most appropriate for which situation? Well, in this case, the measuring tape. All right, and that is all for 8-6.